So the Bible encourages us to bring our concerns, our anxieties, our burdens to God. There's no doubt about that. And if you're anything like me, you bring your worries and your concerns to God and you share them with Him. You may beg Him not to let the worst happen or to relieve you of the circumstance that you're going through. And all of that is scriptural. And the point of this video is not to question your right or the fact that you ought to do that when you feel that way, when you feel anxious, to bring your supplications to God. However, there is a thought that has scriptural proof that's very encouraging and almost delightful to think about. And that's, what if it was possible when in a dire situation, whatever it might be, think about some situation that really, caused you to be anxious and just immersed in anxiety and concern. So think about that. But imagine if you were in that situation that you prayed not out of worry or anxiety, but out of faith. Because I'm sure we can at least agree on the fact that a prayer said out of worry and anxiety and concern, although being definitely heard and cherished by God, it says that He holds our tears in wineskins, so He values those prayers too. But imagine that instead of that, we can definitely say that, though, is not a prayer of faith. It's a prayer of, releasing your burdens on God and your anxieties and your concerns. So, because it can't be that one can be in a state of worry and concern and trepidation and claim then to have ultimate faith and trust in God that He will do what's best for them in the end. I can't see how those two things can harmonize with each other. But can you imagine what it would feel like if in our life and the various situations we face, rather than our emotions going up and down like a roller coaster as those bad experiences come and then resolve themselves, imagine if instead there could be a stability throughout the whole thing, throughout those experiences that keeps us anchored. And to be honest, I'm not even saying how possible this is. I don't know how many people have even achieved this kind of faith in God. And maybe you could comment on your experience on that. And I myself am experimenting with this because I am more of a worried, concerned, anxious prayer rather than a faithful prayer. And this is something I've recently discovered in my life. But what's eye-opening is that we do have scriptural support for this kind of stability being possible in the midst of the hardest times. And I think the proof for that is David's famous Psalm 23. He said, "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters. He restores my soul. He leads me in paths of righteousness for His name's sake." But then look what he says. "Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil." Notice he says even though, which is like, typically he's saying if you were to walk through the valley of the shadow of death, you would be fearful. But he's saying even though I'm in that situation, that valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil. He's not even fearful here. "For you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies." If you think about this, he's in the midst of that very difficult situation and he's got a table prepared. And I guess it's assumed talking about food and dining. Usually this is not a time in life when you feel like even eating, but he's saying, this is how I feel. This is how God treats me in the midst of my problems. He said, "You anoint my head with oil, my cup overflows." And then you kind of see why he feels this stability in the midst of these situations. He has the conviction. He says, "Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever." So, if from this, if not anything else, we can see it's possible for a human to have so much faith in God that the situation that they're in does not decide how much peace they have. Imagine if we could have that gift. Wouldn't that be amazing? In fact, I personally believe, even though I don't have a full measure of this gift in my life, I do believe, though, that every Christian child of God has the opportunity to have that kind of faith. And this is kind of what's suggested even by Paul in Philippians 4, 6, and 7, where he wrote, "Rejoice in the Lord always." And I think he says always because we would say, well, we rejoice when things are going well, and we don't when things aren't. And that's true. Even in other parts of the scriptures, that suggestion is given that that's something we do. But he says, "Rejoice in the Lord always." Again, I will say rejoice. "Let your reasonableness be known to everyone. The Lord is at hand. Do not be anxious about anything. I wouldn't have the courage to say that to somebody because I would feel like a hypocrite, because I myself am often anxious about many things. But he's Paul, maybe he does have the right to say it. Don't be anxious about anything, but in everything, by prayer and supplication with thanksgiving, let your requests be made known to God. And you think when someone is anxious, really anxious, how willing are they to give thanksgiving? They're just absorbed by the problem. So this type of prayer is not one done in an anxious state. He's saying don't be anxious, but just bring it to him objectively. And the peace of God, which surpasses all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus. And I think Paul, he gives evidence of this kind of faith. If you remember when he was in prison with Silas, what were they doing in that prison? They were singing hymns and praising God, so much so that the prisoners around them could hear them. Can you imagine if you were the kind of person that, despite being in the worst of situations, felt at that moment like giving praise to God? This seems to indicate that that's possible. And by the way, this was right after a day of being beaten and flogged. Now, of course, we have plenty of occurrences in the Bible and the scriptures where godly men and women were anxious and concerned and worried. But what that doesn't mean is that God would have preferred them to be. I can't think of any situation where God encouraged his servants to be anxious and worried in the situations they face. Sometimes we look at the life of a faithful person in the scriptures and we think everything was done as God would have wanted them to do it. But just because the Bible doesn't outrightly say they shouldn't have done that, or they didn't need to feel that way, it doesn't mean that what they did would have been preferred in God's eyes. So again, the point of this video is to share an encouraging thought that it might be possible to develop such a faith in God and his promises that circumstances, other people and events, financial losses, betrayal, deception, injustice do not control our emotions as much as they would if we didn't have faith in God. And wouldn't that be, if that was possible to get, wouldn't that be something worth pursuing? And again, if you haven't got the point already, I'm certainly not there yet, but the possibility of not being as fazed by bad experiences, circumstances, certainly brings me a lot of excitement. So in conclusion, I just want to talk about why did I bring this topic up? I came to think about this topic actually because of my own prayers. Recently, I was given understanding that when I pray, there's a subconscious tension in my mind, and I kind of put words to the subconscious tension, and it sounds kind of like this. Is God actually really going to do something about what I'm asking? And I'm actually wondering during the prayer if he's going to help me. And it's the possibility that he won't that is scary and anxiety inducing in itself. So you have the anxiety you're living with and the issue you're facing or the burden you're carrying. And then on top of that, you have, is God listening to me? Is he going to do something about it? It's like doubled up. It's almost worse in the prayer. And that's why prayer can almost sometimes make some people feel worse. Well, I realize the majority of the types of prayers that I pray are not prayers of faith. They're prayers of worry. So now I have chosen to, from time to time, ask God to show me, just for a moment, what it would feel like to ask something of him and actually believe that he's already given it to me, And does that sound crazy? Well, look what Jesus said in Mark 11:24. It's not crazy. He said, "Therefore I tell you, whatever you ask in prayer, believe that you have received it, and it will be yours." Can you imagine what that would feel like? That would be instantaneous relief. If you asked and then you believed that it's already given to you, and then therefore you would be acting like it's already been given to you. Therefore your feelings would be in harmony with as if it was already given to you. What he didn't say was ask in prayer and wonder if it will be granted, or be anxious that he won't answer you. It's ask in prayer and believe. So what does that mean? How did that play out in a Christian's life? None of us would deny the trueness of that statement, but how many people actually feel that their requests have been received after they have approached God?